Week 1 in college football has already delivered, so why should we wait to talk about it? Let's go ahead and open it up, recap it all live with you at home. I'm Collin Kennedy here at 247 Sports HQ, and these are my guys, Chris Hummer, Carl Reed, national college football analyst for us at 247 Sports. Gentlemen, I am having a blast right now, and now I'm having even more fun now that I get to be with you to talk about it all. What a day. I mean, obviously we had great games during the week, but this day alone, I mean, North Carolina, NC State escaped by a combined 3 points. Iowa, 2 safeties and a field goal gets it done for the Hawkeyes. Nebraska, here we go talking about Scott Frost again. And then, of course, that absolute blast of a time down there in San Antonio, Texas, between the Road Runners and the Houston Cougars. Whole lot of action, and it's going on now. We've got Notre Dame and Ohio State. Florida's welcoming in Utah. We will talk about these games live. We'll recap what's already taken place. Again, a whole lot to talk about. Why should we wait? Gentlemen, I want to open it up with probably the biggest talking point of the day. Those 2 teams out there in the ACC in the Carolina area, not feeling so good, Chris. I got to tell you, let me ask you this. If you're North Carolina or you're an NC State fan, who should be more concerned about their football team right now?
I still think NC State's a better football team, so I would say North Carolina, because defensively, I know who's feeling worse, and that's probably Gene Chizik, their new defensive coordinator, because that was atrocious. But I think long-term NC State still projects as a team that can win the ACC. This didn't go smoothly. They're lucky that the opposing kicker had some issues, otherwise they would have lost that game. But I still think NC State has a path to win the conference. North Carolina, if its defense looks like that all year, they might not have a path to a bowl as good as Drake Maye has looked so far. So I would be feeling a lot worse as a North Carolina fan right now than as an NC State fan.
We'll get to Drake Maye here in a second, but Coach, man, if you're in one of those locker rooms, which one are you more uneasy about right now?
Well, North Carolina has been bad on defense the last 2 weeks. You're talking about giving up about 100 points against an FCS school and a Group of 5 school combined. So it is some trouble there. But let's talk expectation here for a second. Okay. North Carolina doesn't have championship expectations. North Carolina State, I've been hearing from my partner, Blake Brockermeyer, from everybody who listens, that NC State is a national championship contender, can win the SEC. And you have missed extra point away from really, really crying in the first week of the season. I don't know if they can match up and beat the Clemsons of the world in those big games with what they put out today. Now, they will go back and improve. Maybe this was a wake-up call that they needed, and you look back as the season goes on and it's something to say, hey, we almost blew it. But if I'm them, if I'm in North Carolina like you asked, I'm really concerned about NC State because they're the team that has national championship aspirations, and they didn't look like a champion today.
It's a wake-up call certainly for both programs. But, hey, you at home, I don't need to wake you up. But what I do need to tell you is that you can submit your questions right here on the show live. That's right. We're diving into all the talk right now. So why don't you join us? Whatever's on your mind, you want to ask a question, you want to submit a comment, we'll talk about it right here live on the show. We're here to talk ball with you. So why don't you go ahead and join us here on the 247 Sports YouTube channel. By the way, while you're submitting your questions, like, share, subscribe here on the brand new 247 Sports YouTube channel. Chris, you mentioned him, Drake Maye. Pretty good day, though.
Had a disgusting catch.
Ooh, man. I mean, I'm telling you. So this is
complete of a man.
Oh, almost had an incredible catch there. Marvin Harrison Jr., Ohio State. Obviously, like I mentioned, you at home, we're watching these games live with you. So we'll provide some live commentary, by the way. But, Chris, going back to what we were talking about, Drake Maye, speaking of great throws, the young guy goes out there for North Carolina and impresses yet again. I think the Tar Heels have someone there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's a reason why Drake Maye was a 5-star recruit back in the 2020 class. He was somebody 247 Sports looked as one of the best quarterbacks in the country for that cycle, and he's been that. He's averaging 323 yards per game so far, 4.5 passing touchdowns per game, completing 73% of his passes. And it goes beyond the stats, I think. He has just looked like a playmaker. Like when he has had to When he has had to play out of structure, he's been excellent. He's been excellent under pressure. He has shown the ability to throw from multiple arm angles. He just looks like a future superstar for North Carolina. Obviously, the defensive issues have held them back, but you have to be super excited for the future of North Carolina football with Drake Maye under center. It would be silly to say there's no drop off from Sam Howell to Drake Maye, because Sam Howell was one of the best quarterbacks in the country the last few seasons. But the hype for North Carolina football, at least offensively under Phil Longo, their offensive coordinator, hasn't abated at all. Drake Maye just looks like a dude.
Drake Maye is him, man. He's a special guy, and he's a guy you can build your program around. Now they got to put the pieces around him. They got to put the offensive line in front of him. They got to give him a defense that can actually get some stops so he can help them win big games. But a super duper bright spot for them today. And if they didn't have him playing, they may be home crying right now also. Special talent. Is going to be a guy that we talk about a lot over the next couple seasons. NFL arm talent, special performance from him. But now they have to build all the other pieces around him. But they do have their guy at quarterback who can play at the highest level.
Now, something to mention here, guys, is that obviously North Carolina was without star wide receiver Josh Downs. I think that would have certainly helped even further Drake Maye's incredible effort. But I wanted to say this, too, as we're talking. Speaking of pieces, offensive line, coach, like you mentioned, definitely needs to be addressed. But that young guy they've got in the backfield with Drake Maye and George Pettaway, I think they've got a special young talent there at running back. I'm going to be fascinated to see how those two young guys develop over the course of the season, because obviously development is key, especially for a team like North Carolina who's going to have to rely on younger pieces moving forward. That being said, speaking of development, Chris, I want to go back to you for this. It seems like development of defensive players is kind of a concern at North Carolina. I think it was our own Brad Crawford who brought it up on Twitter. The last couple of years, despite North Carolina recruiting at a high level, their defensive guys just haven't met expectations. And I don't know if that's the defensive coordinator turnover or just an overall lack of development within the program. Chris, what do you think is the issue here with North Carolina's defense?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a disconnect. North Carolina's recruiting has gotten better and better, and they've invested at the positions you're supposed to invest in. They've had multiple high-level 4- and 5-star recruits along the line of scrimmage defensively. They have brought in some top cornerbacks like Tony Grimes to help solve these defensive issues. And when the talent is there and things aren't working, I think you usually look at coaching. They obviously had Jay Bateman there as their defensive coordinator the last couple seasons. The reason why he left can vary depending on the person you talk to. I think there was some internal dialogue there between members of the staff in terms of who was going to eventually call the shots, I suppose. And Gene Chizik's an interesting choice by Mac Brown. And if those pieces aren't fitting together, I usually look at coaching. I will say it's very difficult to play across from the offense they play across from with the tempo and the pace that Phil Longo does. It's difficult to play complementary football when you have an offense moving that quickly. But North Carolina should still be better, especially I think Mac Brown's in his 4th season now. This is when those recruiting boons should be paying off, and we're just not seeing it for North Carolina.
You know, one of the questions that people ask, you know, when you've recruited at a high level but they haven't performed, is the coach the most important piece, or are the players the most important piece? It seems like we have great players, but we're lacking production. It's just not about your X and O knowledge. It's also, can you inspire those guys and relate to them to get them to play at the highest level? There's a lot of factors to it, but the one bottom line remains is, to this point, defensively, it hasn't worked out. Whether it's a schematic fit, whether it's an inspirational fit, whether it's the way you're developing guys in the weight room and through your speed and conditioning work in the offseason, but they've got to figure it out fast, because you cannot play championship level football with people just knifing you on defense over and over and over again. They got to get that deal figured out.
All right. Speaking of figuring it out fast, I wondered when we were going to touch on this subject. We've got a live question. Shout out to producer Aaron Grisham and Nick Herman, by the way, for helping us out behind the scenes, getting your questions up with us live on the air. I hear we've got a question about Scott Frost, so I do want to cue it up. Let's see what we've got. But obviously, Nebraska, 38-17 win over South Dakota. Not necessarily the best thing in the world, though. I'm interested to see, of course, what all pans out. All right, let's see what we've got here. Coach Carl, love the block. You absolutely called Luther Burden being a monster. My question for you guys, is Scott Frost fired next week even though he won this game? Chris, you're shaking your head no. Why is it?
I mean, his buyout's $15 million until October 1st. Like, it would make no sense to fire Scott Frost right now.
So let me ask you this, Carl. He's not getting fired, we think, unless you have a differing opinion. But doesn't Nebraska at least have to start really considering this path as we get closer to that buyout drop?
Well, they were considering a year ago, so like it's being considered. But what Chris just said is very true. His buyout is $15 million, and it drops to under half of that after October 1st. So from a fiscal situation, it's no way that he gets fired. And he's going to have till October 1st in some key games to show progress with his football team. Nebraska fans are fanatical about Cornhusker football. You have people have no idea on the outside looking in. Win, lose, or draw, the Big Red sells out every single game. They want a winning program. The Scott Frost experience to this point has not worked out. And so the fans and the natives are getting restless. But no, to answer that question, he definitely doesn't get fired next week. They did struggle at the beginning of the game, putting North Dakota away, but they got on track at some point. You got to see if Mark Whipple can continue to get that offense going and getting them moving in the right direction. But we'll know around October 1st what's going to happen from there. But I would say that, like Nebraska, it's like every other school. Everybody in the game has a short list and guys that they would look at if they lose their head coach. So I don't think Nebraska would be any different.
Yeah, and I mean, Trev Alberts reduced Scott Frost's contract for a reason. Like, this was obviously a point of consideration in the offseason. Scott Frost is in prove-it mode all year. There's a big game with Oklahoma coming up in 2 weeks for Nebraska that I think is going to be pretty telling. They go into a bye week right after that leads into October 1st, which will be their next game when conference schedule really gets going. So if something were to happen, I think it happened in that stretch. It's a little too early right now. And I mean, who knows? Like, Nebraska, I don't want to make excuses, but like, Nebraska could get better as the season goes along. The pieces are there. Like, they should be better than they have been. And perhaps it's full-hearted to say, but if Nebraska upsets Oklahoma in a couple weeks, which I'm not predicting personally, but it could happen, we could be having an entirely different conversation. So I think until that buyout drops, Nebraska, the temperature around Nebraska football needs to come down a little bit, because like, you're not going to get a reactionary firing, at least in this moment.
Big time stop here for Ohio State, sacking Tyler Buckner in the backfield. 4th down for the Fighting Irish, obviously following the Florida-Utah game right now as well. It'll be interesting to see how these games continue to play out, but of course, we're going to follow them. And thank you at home for submitting your question. Remember, you who just tuned in, you can submit your questions live as we go through the show. A lot of fun so far. Of course, week 1 has been action-packed to this point. Now, this is another hot-button topic when we talk about the Big Ten. Michigan's quarterback situation and the decision to not make a decision. Carl, I'm still very frustrated by Jim Harbaugh's path of action here when we talk about J.J. McCarthy, Cade McNamara. Look, I watched this game. Cade McNamara came out, looked okay, right? I mean, wasn't the best, but wasn't the worst. But the bottom line here is the Wolverines subbed in McCarthy from time to time for some running elements. And then eventually he got in there for like a quarter and a half and scored. He made some plays with his legs. He provided that excitement that all these Michigan fans have been talking about for what seems like a year plus. Haven't the Wolverines, in a way, Carl, backed themselves into the situation they probably didn't want to be in to begin with? It just feels like they were hoping that McNamara would shut things down this week, and I don't think he did.
Well, McCarthy's a very, very talented guy. I'm going to go way back in the day for some of you younger guys. Trent Dilfer started on a Super Bowl team for the Baltimore Ravens, and they won that Super Bowl based on defense, and Trent was really, really maligned all season because people felt like he couldn't make the throws. And so they couldn't wait till the offseason to throw Trent away and bring in Elvis Gerbach. And guess what? Brian Billick ended up getting fired with Gerbach, and it never really worked out. And people missed the leadership that Trent Dilfer had. So in Michigan, it could be a situation where if they feel like McCarthy is the better quarterback, but McNamara may give them the best chance to win and they may have better chemistry with him. So you have to consider all of those things. But I do think that it was strange not going with one guy out of the other. I think when you play multiple quarterbacks, you just lead yourself to confusion. But Jim Harbaugh is going to tell us he knows what he's doing. But we will see in the coming months. But I do think that McCarthy is a special, special talent, and it's going to be really, really hard to keep him out the football field, especially if the offense stalls.
Chris, I want to put you on the spot, man. Who should be the guy at Michigan? Just come on. Make the decision for us at this point.
I mean, J.J. McCarthy. If you want to win a national championship, the answer is J.J. McCarthy. We saw what Cade McNamara did against Georgia last year. Obviously, that was the best defense. But I mean, we see the ceiling. We see a ceiling with Cade McNamara. With J.J. McCarthy, you imagine what's possible. And if you're Michigan and you're Michigan's offensive staff, given all the pieces you have around him, a Joe Moore winning offensive line, the deepest wide receiver group they've had in Michigan in a very long time, 2 potential All-American running backs, Blake Corum leading the way, you want to imagine what's possible. And you can do that with J.J. McCarthy. And I honestly think Jim Harbaugh's already made the decision. If Cade McNamara was going to be the guy like he's been for this program for the last year, he would be the starter. Instead, we're seeing this baton passing situation where JJ's going to get the last crack at it next week against Hawaii. And I don't think JJ's ever going to get the job back. I think JJ's going to ball out against a Hawaii team that we saw struggle against Vanderbilt, and that'll be that. And I just think that's kind of how Jim Harbaugh set it up. Like, they obviously don't have to make a decision anytime soon, but you're tipping your hand by giving JJ McCarthy this chance. If you wanted to go with the older guy, you wanted to go with the guy in the locker room that everybody respects, you would have done it by now. But they're giving JJ McCarthy every opportunity to win this job. And I think ultimately the Michigan coaching staff knows that it has to be JJ McCarthy if they want to get to where they want to get to.
Now listen to this, guys. You can't say that. Look how he looked against Georgia. How did everybody look against Georgia? How did Bryce Young look against Georgia once Jamison Williams?
He looked like he's got a stiff arm trophy, Carl.
And John Metchie
he looked okay.
You can't ignore what team chemistry means to winning football. You can't ignore it. Now, I coached against J.J. McCarthy in high school. He's the best high school quarterback I've ever played against. I would also start J.J. McCarthy. But I'm going to tell you this. You cannot discount what Harbaugh is doing because that other guy did win.
Is this good for team chemistry with both guys getting starts the first 2 weeks?
Come on now.
It's good for recruiting when Harbaugh goes back and tells all those high school coaches that he gave both guys a chance.
All right. Speaking of looking against Georgia and how well you do, we got a question here. Another one coming in from the live viewers. Remember, you at home, submit your questions live. Simple question here, gentlemen. Carl, I'm going to go to you first since you like talking about how people look against Georgia. Should Oregon shut down the football program after that performance against the Bulldogs? It's a fair question to ask, Carl. What do you think?
No, they shouldn't shut down the football program, man. They got to get better. There's levels to it. And right now, Georgia is at the top level. I had a buddy of mine call me today, and he says everybody in the state of Georgia is upset because everybody's just talking about Alabama and Ohio State. Georgia came out and did what Georgia's supposed to do. Defending national champions, great football team, great football coach, and Kirby Smart is a tough dude. Oregon has got some work to do to get to Georgia's level, and that may not ever happen, when you look at the big scheme of things. But should they shut down their football program? No, man. Where are all the kids going to go that want to play with multiple uniform combinations if we don't have Oregon football?
Okay. Let me ask you this, Chris. Like, if they're not shutting it down, should they be outside of the top 25? Because that was just flat out bad, man.
No. Yeah, I mean, as Carl said earlier, like, everybody looks bad against Georgia's defense. And I think there's something to be said about Oregon going up against one of the 3 best teams in the country week 1. And you maybe shouldn't have as dramatic as a reaction as we're going to see the pollsters have. I don't know about if they should be ranked in the top 25, but I don't think Oregon's going to fall off a cliff. This is still a team I think can contend in the Pac-12. I think Kirby Smart had a really interesting quote after the game about Oregon and where they're at. He was talking about Dan Lanning, obviously his former defensive coordinator, something that's been on his staff for a while. He said this: he's going to do really good. He's going to do a really good job at Oregon. He's relentless. They'll bounce back from this. And he knows we have the better players. He'll never say that, but he knows we have the better players. Kirby Smart knows it. I think Dan Lanning probably knows it as well, given where he came from. That's not an excuse for the final score in this game, but I think it does explain the difference between the two programs. Like, there's a significant difference between Georgia's talent and Oregon's, even though they're both top 10 recruiting class teams. Georgia, I think their average player rating on their roster for the 247 Sports Team Talent Composite is 93.3. Oregon's is 90.6. So that's the difference between, in terms of Oregon, that's the difference between Oregon and, like, I don't even know, like a TCU. Like, there's a pretty significant gap between the two teams in terms of talent. So I just think Dan Lanning needs to recruit to his roster. He needs to recruit up, and they'll get better. Bo Nix won't throw 2 first-quarter interceptions every game. They will play it a little safer offensively moving forward, and they won't have to face a Georgia's defense in the Pac-12 every week. So Oregon's going to be fun.
You said the 93% and 90%. You made it sound like that's the difference between getting accepted to Harvard and having to go to Marshall Community College. Jesus Christ.
I'll bring the stats, bro. You bring the triple option, I bring the stats.
You're also bringing random TCU slander. The Horned Frogs won, Chris. What's wrong with why did you bring them up?
But like, TCU's like the 30th ranked team in the country in the 247 Sports Team Talent Composite, and Oregon's 7 and Georgia's 3. I'm just illustrating the difference between Georgia at the very, very top and the difference between Oregon and the rest of the field going down.
All right, look. Anthony Richardson, by the way, nice rollout and first down completion. Speaking of quarterback play, I've got 2 things. First thing, if you really thought at home, I'm the gambling degenerate on the show. If you were sitting at home thinking Oregon had any shot at covering that spread with Bo Nix at quarterback, you got to reevaluate your standing in the sport. Number 2, speaking of quarterback play, gentlemen, I got to bring this up. I got to bring it up, Chris, because I got a text from our guy, Trey Scott. Quinn Ewers, first 2 passes as he debuts for the Texas Longhorns. Are you ready? First one, nearly intercepted. Second one, picked off, going the other way. Chris, what's going on with Quinn, man? What's happening right now there in Austin?
It's probably over. He needs to cut off the mullet, just retire. Like, he's done playing football. 0 for 2. What is he going to do? I mean, Quinn Ewers, I think going into this, like, if you were following along what's happening in fall camp for Texas, Quinn is a guy who's going to throw some interceptions this year. That is just a fact. He's still learning the college game. He's not as risk adverse, I think, as Steve Sarkisian would like him to be with the football. So he's going to turn the ball over. But Texas ultimately bet on talent long term. I don't know what it's going to look like the first couple of weeks, but I think Quinn will be fine. Texas is up 7-0. I believe they blocked a kick to start the game and scored. So they're up 7-0. I think Texas can live with a couple of Quinn INTs against ULM if it comes to that and still probably win. But it could be ugly next week against Alabama if Quinn throws a couple interceptions. We'll see how it goes.
By the way, Coach, 45-yard rushing touchdown for Anthony Richardson down the left sideline. Gators about to potentially take a 1-point lead over the Utes. The swamp is rocking. But let me ask you this. Carl, if Quinn throws another pick in this game, can I get you to wear that wig? Can we finally get you on the air?
No, man, no.
Come on.
Listen, it's right next to me too. I'm looking over. I'm looking right at it. But I'm gonna tell you what. Quinn has not played football in a little over a year, so it's going to take him some time to adjust to the speed of the game. Steve Sarkisian has a very detailed, complex offense. Give the young fellas some time. Everybody, but when a kid is getting $1 million, everybody wants him to play like $1 million right now. But that's not realistic. Going to take him some time to develop. He might throw a few more picks. Hopefully not many more tonight, and hopefully not a lot against Alabama if they want a chance to compete in that game.
I will say this, like, Chris, our guys at Horns 24/7 did a great job. Taylor Estes, Hudson Standish, Chip Brown, Mike Roach, Jeff Howe. They all were outstanding in covering this quarterback battle between Hudson Card and Quinn Ewers. And it kind of seemed like Quinn was always on the verge of securing the job, but he was a little bit erratic. And I mean, like, shouldn't we not be surprised that he's having some growing pains? As Carl mentioned, the guy hasn't played football, didn't even play high school senior season. So surely he's got some stuff to work through as we move forward, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think Quinn's the type of guy this year that's going to throw for 3,500 yards. 35 touchdowns and 20 interceptions. It's just the reality of it. He's going to turn the ball over a little more than Texas fans would like, but they're betting on upside ultimately. He was always going to win that job, in my opinion. He did not come to Texas to sit. I don't think there was much question about that, even if Hudson Card made a push there. And it's just something the staff and, frankly, like Texas fans are going to have to get used to. Like, you're going to see moments of brilliance from Quinn Ewers because he throws the football better than 99.9% of people on this planet. Like, there's just a fact. Like, the ball comes out of his hand in a very special way. But as Carl said, he hasn't played much football the last couple of years. He's a true freshman. He's, I believe, 19 years old, playing in his first college game tonight. There are going to be some hiccups, like, no question.
So, speaking of interceptions, Coach, Will Levis is at it again. He's got his first interception of the season under the books, if I see so correctly. 13 of 21, 206 yards, touchdown, and INT, as Kentucky is playing Miami of Ohio. They're only leading 13-10 at half, Coach. What's going on with Kentucky, man? What's happening?
Chuck Martin, head coach at Miami of Ohio, former D coordinator at Notre Dame, a big-time defensive coach. And listen to this. Miami of Ohio led by St. Louis native Brett Gabbert at quarterback. It could be an upset. Younger brother of former Tampa Bay Buck, Blaine Gabbert. It could get ugly for the Kentucky boys if they lose to Miami of Ohio.
Oh, man. Well, so we got a Blaine Gabbert mention in the chat. And speaking of guys who played quarterback and looked awkward whenever they did run the ball, Cam Rising picks up a first down for the Utes. Loving this game out there in the swamp. Obviously, Notre Dame and Ohio State battling as well. The Irish are down near the Ohio State goal line. Chris, we know what Will Levis has been hyped up to be, but I know Carl and I were never really buying the hype. Is this an early telltale sign that maybe those expectations may have been way too much in the offseason for that guy?
I mean, I know we love to overreact week one, but I'm not going that far. I think Will Levis could still have an excellent season. I'm probably biased. I saw the dude at the Manning Academy throw live. He is a specimen. Like, it's hard not to fall in love with Will Levis when you see him throw live. Obviously, that was against air. It's a little different going up against Miami, Ohio. He has all the tools. Kentucky is adjusting offensively, new offensive coordinator, new top target with Wan'Dale Robinson on the way out. There's a lot of new there. So I would give Will Levis a little bit of time before we bury him as a potential first-round pick because I still think he has all the tools. And by the way, Virginia Tech transfer Tavian Robinson, a guy that we had on our preseason transfer All-American team, already has 5 catches for 123 yards. He looks like he's going to be Kentucky's new Wan'Dale Robinson.
Hey, I got a question for you two guys while we talk about a tight game between Kentucky and Miami of Ohio. It was beef this summer between Stoops and Cal. Does Kentucky's basketball team play Miami of Ohio's basketball team tough? Maybe. Who knows? Who's the king of the Bluegrass State?
Well, I mean, if Miami of Ohio's basketball team is anything like St. Peter's, then we definitely have a conversation on our hands. Whoa. That being said, I don't know. I think Kentucky basketball would have something to say to that because they still are pretty darn good at football. But, hey, Chris, like, Will Levis, what if the offseason was an overreaction to Will Levis as a prospect? I'm just spitballing here. All right, we've got a question here real quick. Oklahoma question. That's right, Oklahoma Twitter. Former OU beat guy right here. Love the Sooners being in the chat. Thoughts on Oklahoma's performance today against UTEP? Now, Chris, I'll probably cue you up here first. And if you want to go back over the box score real quick, I'll let you do so. And I'll say this, like, in summation, some things to work out. But I thought the Levy system was what we thought it was, and that Venables defense is soon going to be pretty solid. But in the ins and outs, Chris, what stood out to you?
Yeah, I won't lie. I did not get to watch a ton of this game. I had the TV on a couple other ones, but I did see Dylan Gabriel make a couple really nice throws. It's not surprising that Dylan Gabriel looked good in Jeff Levy's system. He obviously has a history there with his time together at UCF with him and Levy. So that's good. I like that they targeted Marvin Mims a little bit. He needed to be fed more last year, so that's a positive. I think defensively is where I might have a little bit of a question. UTEP moved the ball pretty well for stretches in that game. I think Oklahoma's probably going to be fine there. I think Brent Venables is the best defensive coordinator in the country, without question, the best defensive play caller, and they'll work that out. But I don't think the reviews I got from UTEP last week when they played North Texas were particularly positive, and UTEP moving the ball on you could be a little troubling down the line, but it's very early in the year for Oklahoma. They're probably going to get better on that side of the ball. So overall, I think it was a positive debut for Brent Venables, all things considered.
I agree 100%. Coach, you got anything?
When I think about Oklahoma playing UTEP, I don't think about a game like that at all. Tap me in when Oklahoma plays a real game this year. I think that Jeff Lebby's offense looked like it always does. Gabriel handled it well. They hit some RPOs. They had a good day out of the tailback, but we can't really judge the Sooners on a game against UTEP. They're getting to the meat of their schedule here soon and playing some tougher teams, and then we'll be able to see what OU is all about. But I do expect for Brent Venables to have his defense playing at a high level, and Jeff Lebby is a special OC, so they're going to have some production. We're just going to see, can some of those guys make plays?
I'll say this real quick, too. Like, Oklahoma came out, scored pretty quickly, had an offensive lull to be expected, some growing pains on both sides of the ball. I think the offensive line especially had some moments where I was like, they could be playing a little bit better against this UTEP front, but we also know UTEP's got arguably one of the better defensive fronts in Conference USA. So I thought Oklahoma overall, like you guys mentioned, not necessarily a real game as much as it was a workout session, but I do think some encouraging signs, but also, as to be expected, some workouts to be done as well moving forward as Oklahoma tries to get all things together. Let's have some fun to close out the show, guys. Chris, winners and losers. I like when you put it out. We talk about who did well, who didn't have the brightest moments throughout the weeks of college football. So week one, winners and losers that come to mind are?
All right, I'll give you two quick ones real quick. By the way, Notre Dame just scored, so they're up on Ohio State.
Fighting Irish.
My first winner, and this is kind of an off the wall one. Like, good for Arizona, they looked great. Good for Houston beating UTEP or UTSA the way they did. Good for Arkansas. But Raleek Brown, true freshman running back from USC, first ever game, put up the Heisman pose after he scored a touchdown. I love that. I want more Raleek Brown in my life. That guy's electric, personality-wise and on the field. He's a winner. The loser for me, even though they won the game, is Iowa. Iowa is embarrassing offensively today. They've been embarrassing offensively for a long time, but it was particularly bad against South Dakota State. Iowa's defense scored more points than Iowa's offense. Iowa's defense had 4. They had 2 safeties, and Iowa's offense managed 3 against South Dakota State. I realized Iowa had a lot of players out offensively, including a couple of key receivers, but boos were coming down very hard in Kinnick Stadium, and Iowa's got to do something about that offense, man. Like, nepotism is a real thing. Kirk Friend's son is still the offensive coordinator, despite the results not being there the last few years, and I think it's going to continue to haunt Iowa until something really changes.
Winners and losers. My winner, head football coach Ricky Renee, takes his Old Dominion team in, and they beat Virginia Tech and Brent Pry. Old Dominion was picked to finish at the bottom of their division in Conference USA, and they knock off an ACC opponent to open the season. I think that gets them in their momentum rolling in the right direction. That's a big-time win for the Old Dominion program. The loser of the day, I hate to say it, but it's the kicker from East Carolina who missed the PAT and cost his team a potential upset against North Carolina State, a team that people think is going to compete for a national championship. Man, he's got to be having a rough time. I'm sure his social media is blowing up. He may have a rough time on campus. I hope that somebody talks to the kid and make sure that he doesn't fall, too deep in his feelings, because you got to always be able to bounce back. But, man, that's just a rough way to finish a game.
Winner for me, Michigan's defense, specifically the defensive front. I thought the Wolverines, obviously everyone was talking about what's going to happen with the quarterback situation. How are they going to help out those quarterbacks offensively? But we know the losses defensively. Dax Hill in the secondary, but more than anything, losing Hinton, David Ajabo, Aiden Hutchinson up front, massive losses. But I think the Wolverines showcase today, now granted against Colorado State, they've got a lot of guys who can step in there, make plays no matter where they are in the rotation. turn the switch on and just go. They have a whole bunch of big frames, athletic profiles who all fit together. And I think Michigan, while they don't have the star power from last year, have really nice pieces and can be deep, especially deep enough to really give people fits, not only in the Big Ten, but potentially in the postseason. I know Michigan has been thrown around time to time as a potential playoff contender yet again this season. And if that's going to be the case, they're going to need those defensive players to step up. I thought that defensive front looked really good for Michigan today. And then, guys, my loser, Bethune-Cookman. They didn't get a 50 burger from Miami. They didn't get like a 20-piece. They got a 70 steak dinner. 70 points from the Miami Hurricanes. Mario Cristobal getting it done. Bethune-Cookman, look, wrong team, wrong place, wrong time. I'm sorry for what you had to go through. I hope the paycheck was worth it. But how about the Hurricanes laying 70 points in week 1? Oh, my goodness, that is dangerous in itself. I'm going to be seeing what they do, but I can't wait to see you guys all season long. Hey, thanks to you at home for joining us and submitting your questions live. I'd love to do this again. So while you're here, subscribe to the YouTube channel, like the video, share this with friends and family. We will continue to roll out full coverage of the college football season here at 247 Sports. Gentlemen, enjoy Notre Dame, Ohio State. Enjoy Florida, Utah. Enjoy the rest of college football today, and we'll see you next time.